Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to welcome all of you here to Mersin and to this very important historic evening. Historic not only in what it represents for our college and for the relationship that we have with the Jewish Foundation of Cincinnati. Historic not only in the relationship of our students with the numerous organizations and groups within the community that this evening represents as a conclusion of their work together for this year. But I think it's also historic to remember and to recognize the true fragility of life, the values that we bring to our lives. We celebrate tonight the creation of a dream, not just the dream that Jonathan Cohen and David Ellenson had in working with Brian Jaffe and others about this relationship between the college and the Cincinnati community. That was a dream. But it's also the dream of the creation of a state, as we celebrate with the Jewish community around the world on the birthday of the State of Israel. But we also have to recognize the dream that someday there will be peace in this world, that someday there will be safety for all of God's children. But that dream has not yet reached fruition. And so as we celebrate tonight the dreams near and far, so we have to remember that there is still a long way to go to reach the conclusion, the successful accomplishment of the dreams of parents and children around the world. I heard tonight, just a moment ago, from one of our colleagues and friends about the reaction of some Israelis at the JCC when they watched the events of Boston transpiring. And while they celebrate the birthday of their state, of our shared land and state of Israel, they also watched how America deals with a moment in the life of our country that sadly Israelis understand all too well. And we recognize on this night, as we share in this moment of Siyum, that the dreams of our visionaries have so profoundly been accomplished, and yet so profoundly are still far away. So we welcome you this night on behalf of our President, David Ellenson, of course our Dean, you'll hear from in just a few moments, Jonathan Cohen, the many members of our faculty, quite a few of whom are here now, the civic and governmental leaders of our College Institute, with our Board of Governors represented so beautifully tonight. But most of all, I welcome you on behalf of our students. After all, they are the reason for this relationship. And they are the reason we gather in this building, on this campus, to serve them as they prepare to serve the Jewish community through our rabbinic students, the academic community through our graduate students, and all of us serving God's children, each of us in our own ways. So we welcome you as we live the dream, as we accomplish the dream, as we seek the dream. We wish all of you a wonderful evening of celebration, of commemoration, and of remembrance. Thank you.
On the screen is an artistic rendering by HUC-JIR of the proclamation of the State of Israel. 65 years ago today, an original copy of this artwork resides in the American Jewish Archives. And it is a photograph of that is on display on the screen. I will be reading in Hebrew, and my colleagues will be reading in English. בארץ ישראל קם העם היהודי בעוצבת דמותו הרוחנית הדתית והמדינית, בה חי חיי קוממיות ממלכתית, בה יצר נכסי תרבות לאומיים וכלל אנושיים, והוריש לעולם כולו את ספר הספרים הנצחי. לאחר שהוגלה העם היהודי מארצו בכוח הזרוע, שמר לה אמונים בכל ארצות פזוריו, ולא חדל מתפילה ומתקווה לשוב לארצו ולחדש בתוכה את חירותו המדינית.
Eretz Israel was the birthplace of the Jewish people. Here their spiritual, religious, and political identity was shaped. Here they first attained statehood, created cultural values of national and universal significance, and gave to the world the eternal book of books.
After being forcibly exiled from their land, the people kept faith with it throughout their dispersion and never ceased to pray and hope for their return to it and for the restoration in it of their political freedom.
מתוך קשר היסטורי ומסורתי זה, חתרו היהודים בכל דור לשוב ולהיאחז במולדתם העתיקה. ובדורות האחרונים שבו לארצם בהמונם, וחלוצים, מעפילים ומגינים הפריחו נשמות, החיו שפתם העברית, בנו כפרים וערים, והקימו יישוב גדל והולך, השליט על משקו ותרבותו, שוחר שלום ומגן על עצמו, מביא ברכת הקדמה לכל תושבי הארץ, ונושא נפשו לעצמאות ממלכתית. בשנת תרנ"ז 1897 נתכנס הקונגרס הציוני לכל קריאתו של הוגה החזון המדינה היהודית תיאודור הרצל, והכריז על זכות העם היהודי לתקומה לאומית בארצו.
Impelled by this historic and traditional attachment, Jews strove in every successive generation to re-establish themselves in their ancient homeland. In recent decades, they returned in their masses. Pioneers, ma'apilim, and defenders, they made deserts bloom, revived the Hebrew language, built villages and towns, and created a thriving community controlling its own economy and culture, loving peace but knowing how to defend itself, bringing the blessings of progress to all the country's inhabitants, and aspiring towards independent nationhood. In the year 56-57, at the summons of the spiritual father of the Jewish state, Theodor Herzl, the first Zionist Congress convened and proclaimed the right of the Jewish people to national rebirth in its own country.
שארית הפליטה שניצלה מהטבח הנאצי האיום באירופה ויהודי ארצות אחרות לא חדלו להעפיל לארץ ישראל על אף כל קושי, מניעה וסכנה, ולא פסקו לתבוע את זכותם לחיי כבוד, חירות ועמל ישרים במולדת עמם. במלחמת העולם השנייה תרם היישוב העברי בארץ את מלוא חלקו למאבק האומות השוחרות חירות ושלום נגד כוחות הרשע הנאצי, ובדם חייליו ובמאמצו המלחמתי קנה לו את הזכות להימנות עם העמים מייסדי ברית האומות המאוחדות.
Survivors of the Nazi Holocaust in Europe, as well as Jews from other parts of the world, continue to migrate to Eretz Israel, undaunted by difficulties, restrictions, and dangers, and never cease to assert their right to a life of dignity, freedom, and honest toil in their national homeland. In the Second World War, the Jewish community of this country contributed its full share to the struggle of the freedom and peace-loving nations against the forces of Nazi wickedness, and by the blood of its soldiers and its war effort, gained the right to be reckoned among the peoples who founded the United Nations.
ב-29 בנובמבר 1947 קיבלה עצרת האומות המאוחדות החלטה המחייבת הקמת מדינה יהודית בארץ ישראל. העצרת תבעה מאת תושבי ארץ ישראל לאחוז בעצמם בכל הצעדים הנדרשים מצידם הם לביצוע ההחלטה. הכרזה זו של האומות המאוחדות בזכות העם היהודי להקים את מדינתו אינה ניתנה להפקעה. זוהי זכותו הטבעית של העם היהודי להיות ככל עם ועם עומד ברשות עצמו במדינתו הריבונית.
On the 29th of November 1947, the United Nations General Assembly passed a resolution calling for the establishment of a Jewish state in Eretz Israel. The General Assembly required the inhabitants of Eretz Israel to take such steps as were necessary on their part for the implementation of that resolution. This recognition by the UN of the right of the Jewish people to establish their state is irrevocable.
This right is the natural right of the Jewish people to be masters of their own fate, like all other nations, in their own sovereign state.
לפיכך נתכנסנו, אנו, חברי מועצת העם, נציגי היישוב העברי והתנועה הציונית, ביום סיום המנדט הבריטי על ארץ ישראל, ובתוקף זהותנו הטבעית וההיסטורית, ועל יסוד החלטת עצרת האומות המאוחדות, אנו מכריזים בזאת על הקמת מדינה יהודית בארץ ישראל, היא מדינת ישראל.
Accordingly, we, members of the People's Council, representatives of the Jewish community of Eretz Israel and of the Zionist movement, are here assembled on the day of the termination of the British mandate over Eretz Israel, and by virtue of our natural and historic rights, and on the strength of the resolution of the United Nations General Assembly, hereby declare the establishment of the Jewish state in Eretz Israel to be known as the State of Israel.
מדינת ישראל תהא פתוחה לעלייה יהודית ולקיבוץ גלויות. תשקוד על פיתוח הארץ לטובת כל תושביה. תהא מושתתת על יסודות החירות, הצדק והשלום לאור חזונם של נביאי ישראל. תקיים שוויון זכויות חברתי ומדיני גמור לכל אזרחיה, בלי הבדל דת, גזע ומין. תבטיח חופש דת, מצפון, לשון, חינוך ותרבות. תשמור על המקומות הקדושים של כל הדתות, ותהיה נאמנת לעקרונותיה של מגילת האומות המאוחדות.
The state of Israel will be open for Jewish immigration and for the ingathering of the exiles. It will foster the development of the country for the benefit of all its inhabitants. It will be based on freedom, justice, and peace as envisioned by the prophets of Israel.
It will ensure complete equality of social and political rights to all its inhabitants, irrespective of religion, race, or sex. It will guarantee freedom of religion, conscience, language, education, and culture. It will safeguard the holy places of all religions, and it will be faithful to the principles of the Charter of the United Nations.
אנו קוראים לאומות המאוחדות לתת יד לעם היהודי בבניין מדינתו ולקבל את מדינת ישראל לתוך משפחת העמים. אנו קוראים גם בתוך התקפת דמים הנערכת עלינו זה חודשים לבני העם הערבי, תושבי מדינת ישראל, לשמור על השלום וליטול חלקם בבניין המדינה על יסוד אזרחות מלאה ושווה ועל יסוד נציגות מתאימה בכל מוסדותיה הזמניים והקבועים.
We appeal to the United Nations to assist the Jewish people in the building up of its state and to receive the state of Israel into the comity of nations.
We appeal, in the very midst of the onslaught launched against us now for months, to the Arab inhabitants of the state of Israel to preserve peace and participate in the upbuilding of the state on the basis of full and equal citizenship and due representation in all its provisional and permanent institutions.
אנו מושיטים יד שלום ושכנות טובה לכל המדינות השכנות ועמיהם, וקוראים להם לשיתוף פעולה ועזרה הדדית עם העם העברי העצמאי בארצו. מדינת ישראל מוכנה לתרום חלקה במאמץ המשותף לקדמה המזרח התיכון כולו.
We extend our hand to all neighboring states and their peoples in an offer of peace and good neighborliness, and appeal to them to establish bonds of cooperation and mutual help with the sovereign Jewish people settled in its own land. The state of Israel is prepared to do its share in a common effort for the advancement of the entire Middle East.
אנו קוראים אל העם היהודי בכל התפוצות להתלכד סביב היישוב בעלייה ובבניין ולעמוד לימינו במערכת הגדולה של על הגשמת שאיפת הדורות לגאולת ישראל.
We appeal to the Jewish people throughout the diaspora to rally around the Jews of Eretz Israel in the task of immigration and upbuilding, and to stand by them in the great struggle for the realization of the age-old dream, the redemption of Israel.
מתוך ביטחון בצור ישראל, הננו חותמים בחתימת ידינו לעדות על הכרזה זו. במושב מועצת המדינה הזמנית על אדמת המולדת, בעיר תל אביב, היום הזה, ערב שבת, ה' אייר, תש"ח, 14 במאי 1948.
We sing our trust in the rock of Israel. We affix our signatures to this proclamation at this session of the original Council of State on the soil of the homeland in the city of Tel Aviv on this Sabbath Eve, the 5th day of HUC-JIR, 57 of April.
אבינו שבשמיים, צור ישראל וגואלו, ברך את מדינת ישראל, ראשית צמיחת גאולתנו, הגן עליה בעברת חסדך, ופרוס עליה סוכת שלומך, ושלח אורך ועמיתך לראשיה, שריה ויועציה, ותקנן בעצה טובה מלפניך, ונתת שלום בארץ, ושמחת עולם ליושביה, ונאמר אמן. אמן.
Amen.
It's really a joyous coincidence this evening that we are celebrating a siyum, completion of the inaugural cohort of the Jewish Foundation of Cincinnati's Fellows. And the coincidence of it being Yom HaAtzmaut, of it being a day of independence, a day of joy for our people. In just a moment, we are going to be celebrating Cincinnati and celebrating something very specific about this city. We aspire to have Cincinnati be a Jewish destination. And one of the ways we are seeking to reach that goal is to demonstrate that what happens in Cincinnati doesn't have to stay in Cincinnati. That what happens here indeed can be a model of collaboration, of cooperation, of coordination. And so with just a little bit of paranomasia, just a little bit of wordplay, we've taken a rather common phrase, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, and turned it into the holy is greater than the sum of the parts. And our guides through the holy, so to speak, on this week actually in which we read Parashat Kedoshim, the portion of Torah devoted to holiness, the very center of Torah. We will allow our guides, our madrichim and madrichot, to be our fellows. And we're going to do so in a way that will have them moving a little bit and have us moving as well, in an effort to understand how really a puzzle can be a mosaic, how the pieces of the Jewish community in Cincinnati fit together. I hope it's the case that when you came in the room, you were given a number. And assuming that you were, if you have the number 4, then you are going to go upstairs with your guys up the elevator to the 4th floor. And each of the groups is going to remain in your respective places for about 40 to 45 minutes. The students, the fellows, our guides to the holy, so to speak, in Cincinnati, will be moving, giving you a sense, we hope, of how the holy in Cincinnati is greater than the sum of the parts.